From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. This is Michael Lev, your interim sports editor for the Arizona Daily Star. I'm back. Been a while. I am joined today by Justin Spears, who covered spring football for us and is headed to the NFL draft this week to cover the story of Bijan Robinson, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. We're also joined by Bruce Pascoe, our intrepid men's basketball reporter, and we're going to chop it up a little bit here today. We're going to talk about basketball at the outset, and then we'll shift gears over to football. Thanks for joining us on this latest episode of the podcast, which you can get, of course, on wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps the cause. So, hey, Bruce, welcome back to the Wildcast. I would like to say that a lot has happened since your last appearance, but it kind of feels like not a lot has happened. That's all that newsworthy related to the Arizona basketball program. Why don't they have more guys, and should people be upset and panicked about this?
Yeah, it's a little like last year where here we are in late April and it's there's 7 guys. I think there's about 8 at this time last year. I think it's a function of a lot of things. I think it's the transfer portal's made everybody's down a little bit, still searching at this point of year. And then I think part of it is Tommy Lloyd's been a selective recruiter. He doesn't offer a lot of guys. And he's also got some international guys always kind of lurking in the background. So I think that's part of it. And those international guys usually are still playing about now, and they typically wait till after they're done, and then it comes out really quick that they're coming. So and in fact, because of this, I was looking at our archives just to refresh my memory of last year, and I did a story on this yesterday, just about this last year went till May. June. I think Courtney Ramey and Cedric Henderson they both committed on like June 9th, and that's when they were done. And even then they didn't get Kylan Boswell to reclassify until the next month, I think in early July. So it can go on a while, and that's just the sign of the times. I mean, it used to be back in the day, right about now, you'd pretty much, most teams would pretty much be done. They might be pursuing one more guy late in that spring period. Nowadays, it takes a long time, and especially when you're at a high level like this, and you've got guys that are either going for the NBA draft or you're recruiting guys that, we're seeing a lot of guys that are entering the NBA draft and also are entering the portal at the same time. So you're waiting for them to see if they're going to come back from the draft and then where they're going to go, which is exactly what Ramey did last spring, and one reason he took so long to decide. So it's just a lot of things going on, and, it's going to be a while still.
I love Arizona basketball fans a lot because after losing to Princeton, and everyone's curious, how can Arizona bounce back and have a roster that can not only contend for a Pac-12 championship, but finally go far in the tournament? And if you think about it, Bruce, this upcoming year is really going to be the first year that Tommy Lloyd has all of his guys on the team. Now, Azuolas Tubelis can still come back. Yeah. I don't think it's – to me, I think Azuolas Tubelis – I think Azuolas Tubelis is going to stick around and keep his name in the NBA draft. But – you think about this upcoming year's roster, it's going to be all of Tommy Lloyd's guys, and a lot of people are concerned because right now there aren't many players available. I mean, the core is intact. Like, you like Kylan Boswell, who just celebrated his 18th birthday. I don't know if you were aware about this, Bruce, but he's 18 years old, great point guard. Also,
don't tell people he was 17. I think everybody knows that at this point.
But Pelle Larsson stepping up. Umar Ballo continuing to get better. Like, they have a solid core, but outside of that, I look at the other pieces, and I'm not so sure. Like, Dylan Anderson is a big question mark. Henry Vasar, will he improve? To me, it comes down to maybe if they get Carter Bryant on Wednesday, can they maybe get in his ear a little bit and say, we need to reclassify and get you to fast track here and come join us because we need all the help we can get. And as we know, Carter Bryant is an NBA player, so maybe that could be an option for Arizona.
It could be. I mean, guys have done that. I have not heard that about him. He seems committed to 24, but that's a question we will all be asking him if he does commit. Hey, when can you be available for this team?
But what I was saying was with Arizona fans is it's so fascinating to me because if they get Carter Bryant, a 5-star player, they already got Kylan Boswell. These are two great prospects that Arizona has landed under Tommy Lloyd, yet Arizona fans are having this sky is falling mindset right now because Ryan Nembhard is going to Gonzaga over Arizona. Was it Latrell Whitesell, the guy from Cal State Fullerton, put up 16 points per game last year, canceled his visit to the U of A and commits to Alabama. So, a lot of these guys that Arizona's in position to get, they're not closing the deal, and that's why Arizona fans are a little concerned.
The Nembhard thing puzzled me a little bit because it seemed like the second he left Creighton, people just assumed, at least on social media, that he would go to Arizona because of Tommy Lloyd and his brother being tied with Tommy Lloyd, having been recruited from Florida to Gonzaga. But I always thought if Gonzaga wants him, why would he not go there? Certainly why would he not consider seriously going there? So I thought it would be a 50-50 at best. And, who knows, for whatever reason, he ended up going there. I mean, you never know. There's always stuff behind the scenes, and there's always NIL questions about who did what. Granted, Nembhard's international, so it's a little trickier, but international guys are getting NIL money too, so who knows? But that definitely, I think you're right. I think that combined with the Princeton loss, I mean, it's been a long 4 or 5 weeks if you're an Arizona fan, and you want some good news probably, and there has not been. But I think there will be later this spring. It's just going to be, hang on. And frankly, one thing people forget about too is that Kylan Boswell was a 2023 recruit. I mean, they already have him, so and 24, there's a good chance they get Bryant, and they've already got Jamari Phillips, so that's boding well for them. And then this year could be a little bit shaky, but again, I think he's got, there's rumors that he's got bigs that he's looking at maybe for this year internationally, and maybe even a big that's more ready to play than Henry Vasar was. I don't know. We don't know. You never really know about these guys until they get here. But, it'll be just, it's just a wait and see thing.
So I have some experience with this kind of thing from having covered baseball. I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but Chip Hale was not super active in the transfer portal this past season. You know who was? ASU. You know who's in first place in the Pac-12? ASU. There are different ways to go about building programs. Obviously, Tommy Lloyd is very active in the European market, I guess you'd call it. He's had a lot of success with international players. As you've said, Bruce, he's very selective. I don't know how to view that term exactly. Is that a positive in the long term? Is that a negative? From the fans' perspective, I feel like it's a negative because they want to see something tangible.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing it.
It's a topic of great debate right now, and it's very interesting because I think Tommy Lloyd's perspective is, I need to be selective because I want guys who fit this system and are good guys and that come right in and I'm not going to have a problem with. And I think with Sean Miller, you had a guy who was like, I want the best players, and I'm going to check them out a little bit, but if they come in with a little bit of toughness to them that doesn't quite fit, I'm going to make it work. That was his philosophy.
Baggage, if you will.
Yeah, and sometimes that worked, sometimes Kobe Simmons, etc., maybe not work so good, but he got a lot of talent because of that philosophy, and Tommy Lloyd's just been different, and I think the jury's out really. I think in the long term he might really have a success, a way to make success here, but it is a little bit, there are times like this right now where you're just. I would assume if you're a fan, you're thinking, there's just not a lot of guys he's going at, and if he's not hitting a high percentage of those guys, shouldn't he offer more guys? But, you look at last year, he got Ramey and Henderson, and granted, those weren't, they weren't quite first team all league players, but they were good guys who fit the mold and fit the chemistry of what he wanted. And I think that's what he's looking for. And it's just a matter of, are the numbers going to work out? Is he going to get enough of those kind of guys? And we're just, it's too early to tell.
So I'm going to open up a Pandora's box here by asking this question. We could probably do an entire podcast about it, but how much of a factor, Bruce, do you think NIL is playing in a lot of the decisions that these players are making?
Huge.
Well, I mean, I think it's big, and it gets bigger all the time. And you could argue that, 20, 30 years ago, what they didn't call NIL was still money, and maybe there's still, allegations out there of who so-and-so was doing this or that. I mean, there's always been talk about that, but NIL makes it more out of the open. The difference is, though, it's still not out in the open in the sense that there's not contracts. Nobody really knows what's being given. There's sometimes some stuff will leak out, but you don't know if that's just some coach or an agent who's trying to put that number out there to make it sound good. We don't know. And there was, but I think, I'm actually been trying to look into this more myself about how big a deal is it really. And, I think On3 wrote the other day, they have like a full-time NIL guy, and he was writing that they estimated, I think, about half of the guys who enter the transfer portal are looking for NIL money, and or at least trying to see. And I think that, and there's also probably a lot of guys out there who aren't even in the transfer portal who are, behind the scenes having somebody look, hey, if I did enter the portal, what would I get? And so I think it's a big factor. There's no question about it. And I think Arizona, they've got some NIL money. They've got, the Arizona assist is, it sounds like they've been giving guys around 10,000, maybe a little more, from what I've been told. But I think On3 reported that if you want to be an elite school, you're looking at paying your starters 100,000 each. So if that's true, and I don't know if that's true, but if that's true, Arizona's, on the lower end of elite. But
I think it also depends on certain prospects. Ryan Nembhard, it could have very well came down to NIL money, because you look at how much money Drew Timme made last year just by coming back, and we're talking about over 600,000. I know Ryan Nembhard is Canadian, right? So it would have been a little trickier, but there's still money there for guys like that. But the Nembhard family also has come through Gonzaga, so I can understand why Ryan Nembhard would want to go to Gonzaga. Mm-hmm. However, Carter Bryant on Wednesday, Bruce, all in the last year, it seemed like it was a done deal that Carter Bryant was going to be a Wildcat at some point, or Arizona was in the running to land him. And now you look at the NIL deals that Louisville is pulling in. Look at the transfers that they've gotten. Mm-hmm. Look at the high-level recruits that Louisville is keeping up with the Joneses when it comes to NIL. And a big reason why, Bruce, is because they have pretty much like a general manager type of person who's orchestrating all this. I know Arizona Assist is a program that helps them out with that, and I know Reggie Geary and a lot of other people have done a great job, Adam Lazarus as well. But Louisville has a specific basketball-only general manager that focuses on getting NIL deals for these players. And maybe that's what's given Louisville a recruiting advantage over other schools. And, let's say Carter Bryant does go to a place like Louisville. Then you start to wonder, man, NIL is really hurting Arizona, and I never thought I'd say that.
If Carter Bryant goes there, I would definitely be
but that's if he goes to Louisville.
If that's a big factor, because with Nembhard you can't sit, and Nembhard cited the fact that his brother got developed into a high NBA pick and started for the Pacers this year. Because if you're looking at it in a developmental sense, you can if you're on the border of making the NBA, but if you pick the right program and can make the NBA, you're talking about $1 million minimum a year playing in the NBA. What does NIL money matter in college? You want to go somewhere that's going to develop you to get there, if that's something you could do. But you're right, with Carter Bryant, that's interesting because he, that would be interesting to see what he picks there. I think he has potential, to make NIL money as a a domestic player. I think Ryan Nembhard probably I don't know, but he's not going to be able to do commercials for casinos or whatever the heck Drew Timme did, because that's considered work that could violate his visa.
Or Rancho Saurita like Kylan Boswell.
Yeah, that's why Kylan Boswell did that, not Tubelis or somebody, or Kirk Risa. And Kirk Risa was probably arguably as marketed as anybody. He didn't do any of that stuff because he can't. And but they can get passive income and proceeds from these memberships of the collectives like Arizona Assist, and I don't know whatever Gonzaga has. I mean, I assume that's a big thing there. So.
Do you guys know what Louisville's record was last year?
They were bad, weren't they?
Not good.
Not just bad. They were 4-28.
Yeah.
So if something like that happens, if Carter Bryant ends up going to Louisville, it's not because this is a better program that's going to prepare me for the NBA, right? I mean, it would seem to me pretty obvious that it was NIL related.
Yeah.
And I know Arizona and the people around the athletic department are doing everything they can to try to make the U of A competitive in that area. But I don't know. You wonder if it's enough. I mean, football seems like they're doing okay recruiting-wise, like better than they have before. Maybe it's different with football versus basketball because there's a lot more players, and there's only kind of a handful who are maybe raking in big money, and they represent a much smaller percentage of the roster than in basketball, where basketball, handful of guys make all the difference in the world. So one more thing I wanted to ask you about here, Bruce, is they have you projected 7 guys right now if you take out the Tubelis brothers. Mm-hmm. And as you said, Justin, they have a good core, right? The core is promising. But what was the biggest flaw in last year's team? Lack of depth, right? Do you see a path where Arizona can get to having 8-9 guys that you'd feel good about having on the court to provide the depth that you need to go through an entire season and make a run in the NCAA tournament the way things stand right now?
Yeah, I think they can get there. I mean, 8 or 9, but 10, but 11 or 12, no. I mean, they might have to flush it out a little bit. But he's got 1 or 2 internationals. I think he gets. I think it's still possible you get a transfer guy. It's still possible they get a transfer NBA guy who's still thinking out there. So I could see him pulling in 2 or 3 quality players still. I mean, again, it's still April. We're talking this process could go on till sometime in June. I think that's possible, but that could set him up just like last year, where he gets down to only 7 or 8 guys he really trusts. And as we saw, this team kind of hit a wall there. I don't think they got better the last month, 6 weeks of the season, really. And possibly because those guys were just worn down with no depth, and they need more. So I think, but this could be a transition year, as Justin said. This is going to be Tommy Lloyd's first, full roster, and then can he build it up from there? 24-25 should be better, but
Vaysar can make a leap.
And maybe that too, right? I mean,
he gets a lot better. Well,
right.
I'm going to botch the name here, but is it Borovichinen? Borovichinen?
Yeah.
Vichinen. Yeah.
Vichinen.
Vitch, so he can shoot, according to Shaq. So that's what Shaquille O'Neal's always said. He's like, he's got Vitch in his name. He could shoot.
Yeah.
So I mean, he could make. I mean, guys that they have,
they're developing guys. Yeah. I mean,
could make a leap.
Borovichinen was expected to take 2 or 3 years to really be a contributor, and that's what he looked like. And Vaysar was a little disappointed. I think they expected more from him, but he's skilled. He's just maybe needs to be a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher. And as we all know, that jump from your freshman to your sophomore years can be big, because you realize, you have the whole offseason to sit there and realize, I need this, I didn't do this, and and if he has a hard mentality, he can get in there and do it. We'll see. Next year will be really, really huge to see what happens to him.
I don't think they necessarily need to bring in star players, but they need to bring in good players.
Yeah.
Still,
well,
to pad things out.
I wonder if Adama Ball regrets leaving. Because I feel like with this current roster, he could contend to be a 7th man.
I would love to ask that question of every player who transfers elsewhere or puts their name in the transfer portal, like with Truth Serum involved here, a lie detector test. Because I bet you a lot of them would say that they wish they hadn't. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
I'm not speaking for Adama. I'm not assuming anything. I just feel like across the board. That's one of the points that Jed Fish has he tried to make that point, didn't he, at the start of spring ball when you guys were talking about the portal and all that? It's like the grass is not always greener, you know? Sometimes there's something to be said for sticking it out and enduring some challenges and entering into some difficult competitions, but that does not seem to be the prevailing mindset among players of this generation at all. And I know we've talked about this before on the podcast and elsewhere, but I don't think any of us blame them for pursuing these opportunities. I mean, coaches can leave whenever they want. Why shouldn't players be able to as well? I think it makes it difficult to construct a roster. It makes it hard on the fans because you don't feel that same sense of attachment to guys that you did in the past. But, this isn't going to go back to the way it was. If anything, it's just going to become even more prevalent.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true in a big picture sense. I think with Ball, though, Ball strikes me as a classic guy who was in a program 2 years, had plenty of opportunities, and just didn't quite make the cut. And I think he's thinking, and I don't know whether the coaches were thinking or what the decision actually was, but I just feel like if you've gotten that chance and you've invested 2 solid years and it hasn't quite pushed you into the rotation, you might want to just go look somewhere else. And that's kind of an old view before NIL. Now with NIL and everything else going on, it's a whole different deal. I don't think NIL, of course, is any factor with him. But
he landed somewhere?
Santa Clara.
He went to Santa Clara, where and that's an opportunity for him to probably play a lot more and be a shooter. It's a different kind of system that Sendex runs, but it might work for him. I don't know.
See, that kind of move actually makes some sense. Yeah. Because he's probably going to get more playing time there than he ever would have gotten.
Yeah,
start, right?
That's what I'm saying. He wasn't. It didn't look like he was going to develop into a starter here, probably. And I don't know. Maybe part of that's Tommy Lloyd thinking I've got better wings that I can bring in. Maybe he is. But certainly Ball didn't look like, one thing they lacked besides depth was that Ben Matherin, get out of my way, I'm going to score, we're going to win this game. This team didn't have that. I don't think Ball was going to develop into that type of player, and Carissa, was what he was, and he's gone for a number of reasons, and so yeah, it is what it is. But
maybe Boswell becomes that guy. He seems like he has a scorer's mentality, even though he's called a point guard.
I think
he's kind of that lead guard type, right? All right. So last thing for you, Bruce, what are the next couple weeks and months looking like on the kind of the recruiting calendar or the player acquisition calendar?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, I think the internationals could still go a little while because they're still going overseas. But we could see some activity in the transfer portal in the next week or two. And then I think, these 2 weekends are the open weekends for evaluation. So Lloyd and the staff were out last weekend between the Nike and the Adidas circuits looking at those guys. And this weekend, the Nike event will be in Phoenix. So that'll be big for them. But that's 24, 25, 26s that are playing in that. And so we got, Jamari Phillips, Carter Bryant, a few other targets that they're looking at. But so again, that's more working on the future. But I think, it's kind of the juggling acts. They're out looking in the spring for these, at these young guys in the evaluation weekends, but they really got to get working on the current roster. So I think it's going to be, it's hard to tell exactly when things are going to pop up, but again, it could be any time in the next 6 weeks where it's going to come together.
I apologize in advance for the 4 a.m. wake-up call when somebody in Europe commits to Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing, you just never know. I remember, who was it, Daniel Bacho? I think you texted me at like 5:30 or
Kirk
something.
Risa, same
and
deal.
You're like, Bruce, Daniel Bacho just committed, and I'm like, who's Daniel Bacho, and am I even awake now? What is this? Yeah. It was so early in the morning, but typically now they go through ESPN to get on that platform, and you see ESPN will put something out, so-and-so committed from Europe, and that'll come over at about 6 a.m. our time. So yeah, it could be early in the morning, any of these mornings coming up, so beware. You're right, especially me. Yeah.
All right. Well,
all right, cool.
Thank you so much for filling us in on all things basketball. Bruce,
yeah, it was fun.
Rest for the weary, sleep light, never know what the
tight.
next. Yeah, sleep light, sleep tight. You never know
really.
when the next European sensation is going to drop into your lap here. So we're going to transition to football.
Cool.
Say goodbye to Bruce. Justin, you were
Appreciate
out
you,
there
Bruce.
for
Thank you.
every single spring practice. These past few weeks, I'm very familiar with that grind.
Yep.
To be sure, I think it's awesome that Jed Fish allows the media to watch every minute of it. That's not the case across the Pac-12 or across the country, for sure. Like even USC, which used to be the most open program in America, like I think they get to watch the first 20 minutes. Which is
Really?
not super useful.
Stretching.
And then you sort of have to try to fill in the gaps afterward. But what's your number one top line takeaway from what you saw over the course of 15 spring practices, including the April 15 spring game?
I think probably the biggest takeaway so far is that Arizona just looks bigger. All the young guys who contributed last year have all gained a significant amount of weight. And Tyler Owens, their strength and conditioning coach, is like the unsung hero of the program because these guys they're physically just so much bigger and they look like a legitimate Power 5 team. And probably the one guy where I actually kind of took a step back and went, whoa, was quarterback Jayden de Laura, who said last year he came to campus weighing 182. Now he's right around 210. And you would think that added weight, or as he calls body armor, you would think that maybe it would slow him down a little bit. And so far in practice, or what I saw in spring ball over the last 5 weeks, was Jaden's starting to use his legs, and he looks quicker, faster, and he's also protecting himself. Like he's not being reckless trying to truck Justin Flo or any of Arizona's linebackers. He's doing a good job of protecting himself. And, Jaden last year, we were wondering how would he evolve in this new system and how would he grow as a quarterback. And I'll never forget watching the Mississippi State game, which you were at, and how many times did he have 12 yards or 14 yards of open field in front of him. And even us in the press box were like, dude, run. It's right there. You could pick up a first down, and he didn't do it. He refused to. And then the following week against North Dakota State, he has 50 yards, which I think was a season high for him or one of his top rushing performances. But he started to use his legs. He learned from the Mississippi State game and grew from it and, found his moments and made the most out of it. And I think his growth last year was substantial. He have some down moments? Yes. We all know about the Washington State game and him throwing 4 interceptions, but Jayden de Laura, I think the learning experience that he had from last year coupled with his physical growth in the offseason, I think it sets up a pretty great season for Jayden de Laura. But as Jimmy Doherty and Jed Fish have said, it doesn't mean a damn thing unless you're winning. You look at all the other quarterbacks in the Pac-12 like Michael Penix and Bo Nix and Caleb Williams. What do all these guys have in common? They all went to a bowl game. They all had winning seasons. Jayden de Laura did not, and that's why I think he's kind of considered as a tier 2 or tier 3 quarterback in the conference. But I think overall biggest takeaway, guys look bigger, they look faster and stronger, and Jayden de Laura looks like a damn good quarterback.
Yeah, I think that people underestimate just how big of a transition it was for him. And you referenced this in a story you wrote the other day, that all those guys in the Pac-12 who came in, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, they all entered into systems that they were already familiar with. They had coaches. Cameron Ward's another one. They joined coaches that they had played for previously. So it was a relatively easy learning curve for those guys. Whereas Jayden, everything and everybody was new, right down to the fact that you're taking snaps from under center, which he never did before. He played in a run-and-shoot style system in both high school and college. The tight end is involved in the offense. They literally didn't have a tight end on the field 98% of the time at those two schools. So it was a lot. And I think that he's in a position right now where he could make a big leap in year 2 in the system. And to me, the biggest area where he needs to progress is cutting down on turnovers, right? There were just too many. If you look at the interception leaders in the Pac-12, he's right at the top or at the bottom, or however you want to phrase it. I mean, he had 13 picks. That was the most of any quarterback. The next closest was Dorian Thompson-Robinson of UCLA with 10. Nobody else had double digits.
And half of his interceptions came in two games.
Yeah,
he had 4 against Washington State and 3 against Mississippi State, right?
Yeah, those 2 games. So. I mean, and a lot of times, as we've talked about many times here on the podcast, it just feels like he's trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And you could just you could see these steps that he took during the course of the season. Like, I wasn't running, he wasn't running early in the season. Then he started running. He wasn't necessarily, going to check downs or early in the season. Then he started to figure out that maybe, hey, I don't have to make a big play every single time. So, while I don't think that Jayden is the best quarterback in the country, which Jed keeps saying about him, I do think he has a chance to move into, as you referenced, that upper tier of players. Moving elsewhere in the offense, Justin, the player I was most impressed with during the spring game was Rayshon Luke, Speedy. I know one of his touchdowns was called back because of a holding penalty, but holy moly, he looked super smooth. And he just looked like he was moving at a faster pace than everybody else on the field. Weirdly, not a lot of talk about him this spring because Michael Wiley's kind of established, right, as the number 1 running back. How do you see the backfield playing out this year?
So Arizona's running backs, and I agree with you, he looks very smooth, and I'm talking about Speedy. The way he runs, it looks so natural. It almost looks like he's gliding. And they're not even close to being the same running back, but who looked really smooth running the football, and I remember watching him at Arizona Stadium, is Christian McCaffrey. Like, the way that he just glided around the field, it was almost like just a pleasure to watch. Just watching, it was like so satisfying to watch him run the football. And I kind of get the same way with Speedy Luke. It looks so natural to him, but he's in a backfield that has Michael Wiley, who we all thought could have gone to the NFL draft. After the way he performed in the Territorial Cup, and he seemed like a guy where, Chris Carter says all I do is catch touchdowns. It seemed like Michael Wiley last season was all I do is run for touchdowns. He found himself in the end zone pretty much every single game this past season. For him to come back, I think is a big addition for Arizona's offense. And then you add in Jonah Coleman, who I know is one of your favorites. He looks like Maurice Jones-Drew. The way that his legs are built, he's got a short stature, but kind of, lower center of gravity or whatever, however you want to describe it. He's very powerful, yet very quick. He can run past you, but he can also run through you. And so that's a great secondary option. And then DJ Williams from Florida State, the transfer, who's older, has experience, you still have him there. And then, by the way, you also have Rayshon Speedy Luke. And then you also have this brilliant freshman in Brandon Johnson, who looked pretty good over the course of the spring. And then Stevie Rocker, Tucson's very own, who could start at a lot of places in college football. Like, he could very well go to Nevada and be the starting running back there, or go to any other Mountain West or WAC schools. But he decides, I'm going to stick around at Arizona. So, yes, once again, the running back group is very deep, and it's going to be a big part to Arizona's system. But, Michael Wiley says that he wants to improve on his pass catching abilities. He's already a decent receiver, but
I'd say very good for a running back.
But he wants to, continue to improve in that area because that's what makes you valuable as an NFL prospect.
Yeah, that's a way that you can get more than one of those guys on the field. You could put Wiley and Luke on the field at the same time if one of them is in the slot, right? And maybe create some mismatches by isolating them on the linebacker, or maybe
almost
even
like
a
the
safety.
Chiefs with like Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, there's some things you can do there.
And you need to get creative because it's impossible otherwise to kind of keep everybody happy. I think that Scotty Graham does a great job of boosting morale and kind of this all for one for all mindset in the running back room. But I've been around plenty of football teams with disgruntled running backs too, where they're just like, why am I not getting the ball? I'm good. And it's hard. It's really hard because there's only one football.
Yeah.
They have Tetairoa McMillan, and they have Jacob Cowing, and they have Tanner McLaughlin, and they have a great quarterback, and Michael Wiley's coming back. So it's hard to figure out like how to make everybody happy, how to distribute the ball. I go back to like, why isn't Rayshon Luke the number one kickoff returner? They haven't used him in that role, and it's always kind of puzzled me. Like, he seems perfect for it. Like, don't you want someone who's got like a great sprinter speed?
He is a track star.
Yeah, doing that. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But the other kind of big development on offense this spring was moving Jonah Savainea from guard to tackle.
Line talk.
Yeah, moving him from guard to tackle, which is something that I asked Brendan Carroll about, I think in November of last year, like whether this was a possibility, and he certainly didn't shoot it down. So you know that it was something they were thinking about. One of the reasons that you can do that with Jonah is, I mean, he's 6'5". You can't just move anyone from guard to tackle. Like, you got to have a certain amount of length to you, and he's big enough to do it. And typically, it's easier to find interior linemen than it is to find tackle. So if he can do it, this could become a permanent change for them. I know they have some really good players coming in who are true freshmen. It's hard for true freshmen to play in year one on the offensive line. Big Jonah was an exception to that rule. How do you see it playing out?
Well, I think that they're going to have another guy who's going to be an exception to that rule in Raymond Polito, the 4-star offensive lineman who committed to Alabama and then flipped to Arizona. Like, think about that. In a recruiting battle, Arizona outdueled Alabama in the Crimson Tide. Like, that wouldn't have happened in the previous two regimes. But Raymond Polito is 6'6", 340 pounds. So he's kind of like in the same mold as Jonah Savainea. Jonah Savainea, he came in at right around 347 pounds-ish when he got to Arizona, then lost about 15 pounds and has been more mobile, looks great on his feet. And I think Raymond Polito could kind of be in that same mold where he comes in, starts at guard, and then you see the production that he gives you there, and maybe you could possibly move him around because, next year, Arizona's going to need a new left tackle and Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan's going to be getting ready for the NFL draft, so maybe this is kind of like a crash course to college football for Raymond Polito. We're going to put you at guard. We'll see how you do, and then we'll change course if need be. So I can see the plan for Brendan Carroll and his offensive line.
Yeah, I was just going to say they're going to have an opening at left tackle in 2024.
Yeah.
So if it would not be unprecedented at all, as we're seeing right now, for someone to start as a freshman at guard and then later move out to tackle. They're going to have to see how the pieces fit together best. I have no idea whether Polito has ever played guard. I'm guessing he's been a tackle for most of his high school career, given how tall he is.
And usually
Jonah,
your best offensive lineman plays tackle.
That's what's so weird about Jonah, too, is he never played tackle. He was always an interior player because he was so big. But it's promising to me to see the types of offensive linemen they're bringing in. I just think it's so important. It's the area where Arizona has suffered compared to a lot of their competitors, the offensive and defensive lines. But before we get to the defensive line, which I want to talk about at length here, I want to ask one more question about the offense. T-Mac, I think we all pretty much agree that the sky's the limit for him, that he could really take off, maybe go from freshman All-American to All-American period. This year, Jacob Cowing, they're going to utilize in a different way. Who do you see as that third guy? Dorian Singer was that guy last year. He was actually kind of the second guy, maybe even the first guy, depending on the game. But who's that third piece in the wide receiver group? Who's going to emerge this year in your view?
Can it be a tight end?
It can.
I mean, because I think Tanner McLaughlin's going to have a great year, and Kean Burnett. Those two. I mean, we talk about having two running backs on the field at the same time. Look for Arizona to run the double tight end set with Tanner McLaughlin and Kean Burnett, because Kean, he came in last year. We all assumed that he was going to be the starting tight end because he was highly rated, had all these great offers. I mean, we saw him in high school, and he just looked the part of a Power 5 tight end. But he came in and kind of had a backup role. And
he struggled, yeah.
He struggled. And kind of understudied Tanner McLaughlin. And having a player who's just a little bit older than you kind of show you how it's done at the college level, I thought was very, very beneficial for Kean Burnett. And physically, now, I mean, he already looked the part, but even more so now, he's just so physically dominant. And I think him and Tanner McLaughlin is going to give Arizona that extra dimension that maybe they were missing last year. And so I'm excited for the tight end group. But in terms of like receivers, just to kind of stick with what you were asking about, Kevin Green has turned into a guy, another former USC commit who flipped to Arizona. And he's going to be taking over Jacob Cowling's role. Cowling's taking over the Z position, which was held down by Dorian Singer. So Cowling's somewhat learning a newer position, but it's been an easy transition for him. Kevin Green has been awesome at that slot receiver, so expect him to get a lot of touches there. But, man, there have been some interesting backup freshmen and newcomers. Devin Hyatt, who is the brother of Biletnikoff winner Jalen Hyatt at Tennessee, he had a very impactful spring, and same with Malachi Riley. And Jaden DeLora, we've asked him in spring, who's a receiver that maybe we should keep an eye on moving forward. And Jaden DeLora loves Malachi Riley. So there's a lot of potential there, but as we've spoken with Jed Fish and all the other offensive coaches, they don't really tap into the backup receivers.
No.
So I think it's a safe bet that your three go-to receivers are going to be Cowling, T-Mac, and Kevin Green. But you got T-Mac and
AJ Jones is in that mix, maybe a little bit too, with a different body type. They could definitely play more 12 personnel this year, right?
But I don't
go to the two tight ends.
Yeah.
At times, Kean Burnett is someone who kind of that hybrid a little bit. Not the true inline tight end.
Yeah.
More of a modern tight end who you can split out. So a lot of weaponry. I mean, this offense could be really, really good.
I mean, they had the sixth best passing offense in college football last year.
They did.
And it seems like they're only getting better.
So, all right. Now the other side of the ball, okay?
Kind of bearing the lead here.
Yeah. Forgive my skepticism here, okay? I know that they've made a ton of moves. Every guy that they brought in through the portal, front six defender, right? I mean, that's no coincidence. That is a clear pattern. They are trying to upgrade the defensive line, trying to upgrade the linebackers. I'll believe it when I see it. You've made a lot of references to how bad they were defensively this past year. They haven't been good defensively in a long, long time. Like really good, like top half of the Pac-12 in several categories good. It's been forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about a major kind of cultural shift that's needed on that side of the ball. So, all right, I've just now played devil's advocate. Give me the other side of it. What gives you reason for optimism as to why they might be better?
So Johnny Nanson's a second-year defensive coordinator, so he's got that under his belt. You have a undersized but very productive linebacker in Jacob Manu. You also have Ephesians Prysock, who looks the part of a legitimate cornerback. He looks like kind of like a Jalen Ramsey prototype. And then you also add in all of the players who got into games last year as true freshmen. They're all a little bit older. They all added a little bit of weight on. They're about it seems like a common theme for a lot of players is that they've put on somewhere between 20 to 30 pounds. Jaden DeLora did it. A lot of guys on the defensive line who needed that weight, they all did it as well. So the experience, the added body weight for a lot of the younger players, coupled in with some players who were actually highly rated recruits but didn't pan out at their previous stops. Justin Flo should be preparing for the NFL draft right now. Justin Flo was projected to be a top 10 pick for the 2023 NFL draft several years ago, but didn't pan out at Oregon. Injuries, really struggled to kind of control his emotions on the field and played very erratic. Johnny Nansen and Jed Fish, they worked on that this spring. And Justin Flo, he's been able to say, like, Johnny Nansen, I'm very thankful for him because he's a great coach. And I think Justin Flo kind of really working on his mentals this year more because he's got the physical traits, but being able to study offenses, being able to, work on the fly and make very quick decisions, working on that this spring and emerging as Arizona's starting Mike linebacker, I think gives Arizona a lot of hope on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he was a superstar recruit. I mean, 5-star, top 10 player in the country, regardless of position. Tons of injuries up at Oregon. When he did play, he wasn't as effective. And I think, maybe that, you probably never get him to say this because he just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But maybe that was a humbling experience for him in some way. I can't just rely on my physical ability anymore at this level. I have to play a cerebral game to some extent. I have to pick my spots. I have to be a smarter football player.
Yeah.
And, hopefully, Johnny Nansen and the staff can get that out of him.
He doesn't lack energy.
That's for sure, yeah.
Because there was actually a point in time, and I hope that the Arizona football team doesn't get mad at me for kind of revealing this, but there was one practice where they actually kind of yelled at him and grilled him because they were doing team offense or a team segment, and it was ones versus ones. It was starting offense versus starting defense, and Tanner McLaughlin caught a ball and was kind of near the sideline, and they blew the play dead, or the play was about to end, and Justin Flo just came and lit up Tanner McLaughlin. It wasn't like a vicious Vontaze Burfict, I'm going for your knees hit, but he certainly blew up Tanner McLaughlin, and they pulled him. We're like, okay, you can't be doing this kind of stuff. But hey, like Rich Rod always said, I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a fine line, always with defensive players in practice. I observed this with Ray Malaluga and Brian Cushing back in the day at USC. I mean, Brian Cushing was that guy who would always give that extra shot to a player right after the whistle or at the sideline or whatever. And you kind of like that to a degree. I mean, it's a violent game, and their defense hasn't been super aggressive and impactful in those ways in recent years. So maybe that's something they need. I'm looking right now at the listed weights for players across the roster, and the top 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the top 6 or 7 on the team are offensive linemen, which makes a lot of sense. But then you've got Tyler Manoa listed at 310. He might be bigger than that. Bill Norton listed at 300. He might be bigger than that. And they added another defensive tackle from Indiana, right, who's supposedly over 300 pounds. Just because you're big doesn't mean you're good. But how could this theoretically aid the cause when it comes to the Arizona defense?
When you look at the box scores for all these guys, so look at the 3 big guys they added up front. Bill Norton, Tyler Manoa, and Sio Nafagoa Toto.
Well done.
If I'm pronouncing that name correctly, from Indiana. But all 3 of those guys are all 6'3", taller, and they're all 300-plus pounds. But when you look at the box score, when you look at all their stats of their previous stops, it's not eyebrow-raising. It's like, oh, boy, they didn't really do anything. But when you're that size, and when you have guys like Jacob Manu, who have a nose for the ball, Justin Flo, who I think is going to be a run stopper for Arizona and did well this year, you don't need them to make the plays. You just need them to be in the gaps. You need to make it tough for other offensive linemen to push these guys. And when you're in the gaps, it allows your linebackers to make plays at the line of scrimmage. And TFLs, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know Arizona wasn't particularly the best when it came to tackles for loss as a defensive unit. They had a lot of TFLs this season. Arizona last year struggled to stop the run. They allowed over 300 rushing yards in 3 games last year. It's disgusting. They were 10th in the conference in rushing defense. And even with the deep running back group that they have, Arizona, the defense made plays at the line of scrimmage and stopped the run. Now, I take it with a grain of salt because it's spring ball. I want to see it against NAU, Mississippi State, other Pac-12 schools. But so far, the areas in which they struggled last year, they've made those improvements. The defensive lineman, and again, you also have Tai Uiagalelei, who's still there getting reps at defensive tackle. Jacob Kongaika, who, made impactful plays last year as well. He's still in that rotation. Tia Savea from UCLA. Isaiah Johnson still needs to come back from injury, so we still need to see what he's got. Like, there's a lot of bodies that Arizona can throw out there on the defensive line. And, Johnny Nansen said last year, I like to rotate a bunch of guys up front, but he didn't really do that. Now this year, with a lot of his guys and more bodies, maybe they can get to that and always have fresh legs.
Yeah, he eventually did it. It took like 2/3 of the season for him to get to that point. And then he just all of a sudden started playing these freshmen, and you could see hope for the future.
Yeah, I didn't even mention the edge rushers like Deuce Davis and Sterling Lane.
Yeah, and Isaiah Ward as well. They at times played 4 true freshmen on the defensive line last year, which is crazy. But if you're trying to build a program, trying to build something long term, it makes a lot of sense. I think the 300+ pound guys, they're there to occupy space. They're there to hold the line.
That's what it is.
They're there to occupy blockers so that the likes of Jacob Manu and Justin Flo can make plays, right? Elsewhere on the defense, you mentioned Ephesians Prysock. It seems like the arrow is pointing up for him. He seems like he's got star potential. Do you think Takario Davis is going to be the other guy? There's a lot of Charles Yates talk early on in camp. This junior college transfer that kind of came out of nowhere seemed to be very impressive. How do you see kind of the rest of the secondary coming together?
Charles Yates Jr., even though he's from a junior college in Los Angeles, he hails from Mobile, Alabama. Some Southern football, man. That guy is cut from a different kind of cloth, if you know what I mean. He's the goods, man. And he's a little bit undersized, but he's really quick. And the one play that really jumped out to me this spring was he was actually in a one-on-one with T-Mac. And T-Mac has about 5 or 6 inches on him. And yet they tried to throw a ball in the back of the end zone for T-Mac to high point it. And Charles Yates jumped up like a jackrabbit and grabbed the ball and intercepted it. And we didn't get a chance to see it in person because it was...
That was one inside that they tweeted out, right?
As our photographer, Kelly Presnell, says, they're in the barn. Mm-hmm. So that when they're in the indoor facility, they're in the barn. We didn't get a chance to see that, but they posted a video of it, and it's very sweet. And Charles Yates and his athleticism, it's something to behold. He's very sneaky athletic. But, man, he got a lot of reps, and he looked really good. So I think it's between him and Takario Davis. But I think if I were to bank on anyone starting on the other cornerback spot opposite of Ephesians Prysock, it's going to be Takario. And Takario and Ephesians, they're long. They look like shooting guards playing cornerback. These are Dwayne Walker prototypes. And now John Richardson, the very fiery and passionate coach, who was always one of the loudest voices on the field, he inherits 2 great cornerbacks and gets them at a very good phase in their life. It's almost like when you go and adopt a dog for your family and you adopt the 1-year-old dog. It's not a puppy, but it's not an old dog. It's like the perfect prototype. It's the one that you want to have because there's still a lot of room to grow, but they're past the infancy stages of their life. And now Takario Davis and Ephesians Prysock going into year 2, it gives them a lot of hope at cornerback. And then safety, I mean, they can go with, a number of guys, but I think it's a safe bet that Isaiah Taylor is going to be Arizona's starting free safety. In Arizona, they ranked last in the Pac-12 in interceptions, and it seemed like every other practice Isaiah Taylor was coming down with the ball. And it was against Jaden DeLaura, who's a pretty solid quarterback. And Isaiah Taylor is a ball hawk. I like him taking over for Jackson Turner. Gunnar Maldonado, who's been kind of bouncing around, he played a little bit of nickelback last year. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to be the box safety where Christian Young played last year. He's not as long. Like Christian Young was the perfect player for that position. But Gunnar Maldonado has really emerged as a very solid option at strong safety. And then, they have Dalton Johnson, who I give him a ton of credit because he was a part of the 2021 recruiting class. And he signed to Arizona before Jedd Fisch was even hired. He signed when Kevin Sumlin was gone and Arizona was still looking for a head coach. And yet he still signed to Arizona and has trusted the process and is one of those guys who looks like he's going to stick it out. And I thought at first he might start with Isaiah Taylor, but we'll see. Regardless, they have depth at safety. And I didn't even mention DJ Warnell, who was a special teams standout and became a key contributor in the secondary because of what he did on special teams. So they have some guys.
They moved Traden Stukes to that nickel position, which is interesting. He's not the biggest guy, but he had, if I recall, one of the best tackling percentages in terms of tackles made versus tackles missed of anyone on the team last year. Kind of has a knack for the ball. Martell Irby's another one who was recruited by Arizona way back in the day as a running back, ended up going to UCLA, was pretty much gave up on football last year, and then he decided to come back. He's also in the mix at defensive back. Is he in the nickel package or competing with Traden? Is that where they're looking at him?
Yeah, and I think Traden's going to – Martell Irby was never really installed into the starting defense. I mean, they give him a lot of looks, but I think it's a safe bet that Traden is going to start at nickelback. And Martell, he's getting back into the swing of things. He medically retired, took the last year off, and when you're playing football, like it takes you a little while to kind of get back on the saddle. You can't just throw on the pads and go back to being a special player. So Martell Irby's experience is going to be very valuable for Arizona. And if anything, having a player like that on your special teams units, DJ Warnell on your special teams units, kickoff coverage, punt coverage, like these are very important things for a football team. But I think Martell Irby, injuries happen. Maybe Traden is banged up this year and they give Martell a look. But, we talk about all these bodies, and it was an issue with Arizona last year. They didn't really have any. And these guys, I think, are going to be productive this year. I like the experience that Arizona has.
Yeah, they've definitely added just a lot of interesting parts on that side of the ball this offseason, which was kind of like phase two. Experience parts was just phase two of the project, right? It was like first offseason offense, second offseason defense. You can't fix all your problems in 1 year. If they can approximate the leap that the offense made, they will be going bowling, I think, this season. So the last thing we're going to talk about here on this episode of the Wildcast podcast is the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Normally, we would not be sending someone to the draft, but this is a special occasion.
It is.
Something unique is happening this year. Tucson's very own Bijan Robinson is almost certainly going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He has a chance to be the highest drafted Tucsonan in the history of the NFL, professional sports overall, I believe.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding things correctly.
Mike Dawson went 22 in 76.
So I think most projections have Bijan going higher than 22. You've seen him play a bunch of times. You've talked to him a million times. You've had lunch with him at EG's when Alabama offered him a scholarship. What can you tell us about Bijan?
Well, if he goes farther than 22, I'm going to be very sad because the Chargers have the number 21 overall pick. And Austin Eckler is on the market, so Chargers need a running back.
So that's the floor, in other words. You will run up there yourself with the card.
I will hug
right?
the bell. Yeah. I will represent Bijan on stage if that were to happen. But, Bijan's a special kid. I remember, hearing about him when he was at Sal Point. He was a standout for their freshman team and then went and became a part of their varsity team. And all I heard about was this kid is going to be very special. And then they threw him in there in kind of like the second half of the varsity season, and he broke off for many runs and then started to generate a bunch of interest and got offers from Arizona and Washington and Utah. And, when I first met him, again, I just remember him as a soon-to-be sophomore with chubby cheeks and was just the most polite young man ever. He is wise beyond his years. And I got that just interacting with him when he was just a 14-year-old, 15-year-old. And then eventually our relationship grew, and I kind of became like the Bijan reporter there for a little bit because
you compared yourself to Brian Windhorst, right, in the column that you wrote the other day, how on the ground floor with LeBron, there was someone chronicling him, and
Yeah.
it was Brian Windhorst, and you were kind of that guy for Bijan.
Yeah. Well, Bijan didn't have Twitter, and he was active on Instagram, but he didn't really like boast his offers or anything like that. He kind of kept things to himself, and every time he got an offer, he would tell me, "Hey, Ohio State offered today, Florida offered me today, USC offered," and it's a big deal to me because I wear number 5 because of Reggie Bush. He would keep me in the loop with all of these things, and then I would report on it. I mean, shoot, like I said, we were minutes away from eating EGs, and all of a sudden, Jeff Banks from Alabama calls him and says, "Yeah, the Crimson Tide, we want you." And it was so surreal because this is a national powerhouse in Alabama, and they're calling this guy who I'm about to have lunch with like right now and give him an offer. And so Bijan really benefited my career. I'm very thankful for that, but I'm also very thankful for his friendship. He was there for me when my father passed away. He's always been there as a friend. And our communication has kind of, dipped in the last couple of years because he's a very busy guy. He's playing for Texas. He's, trying to win a Heisman, trying to get drafted by the NFL. Like, Bijan's a very busy guy. Yet, whenever we do message each other, it's like we're buds again, and so that part is really cool. And he comes from a great family, has great parents. His grandparents, Cleo Robinson, who's a Pac-12 official and a Hall of Famer. His granduncle, Paul Robinson, played running back for the Cincinnati Bengals. His grandmother, Jerry Robinson, I mean, she is the sweetest woman ever. He has a great foundation, and he's a great human being. And so I'm very excited to see his football talents take him to this level, especially when you know that he's a great person.
If he had come out 20 years ago, he would be a top 5 pick, right?
100%.
Almost certainly, because when you look at just his ability, where all the draft experts rank him regardless of position, he is a top 5 player in this draft. He will not go in the top 5. And that is because running back, I don't want to say I hate the term devalued because I don't think it's entirely accurate. It's just there's a lot of good running backs. You can get a good running back
for cheap
later in the draft, maybe even undrafted. But Bijan's special, right? Like, I don't know if he's quite on the Saquon Barkley level, but he might be pretty close. He's someone that you can utilize in the passing game, which is super duper important for NFL teams in this era. So, I've seen him go as high as 8 in some of these mock drafts. I've seen him go as low as, I want to say 26. Dallas is 26, right? I think almost certainly, whether it's in the top 10 or it's in the top 25, he's going to be drafted on Thursday.
Yes.
Which is day one of the NFL draft. It's the first round only. There's only 31 picks this year instead of 32. It's going to happen in all likelihood. And it's going to be a really cool moment for Bijan. It's going to be a really cool moment for the Tucson community, and we're going to be there to chronicle it. So I think that's a pretty cool experience. I'm excited for you, Justin, that you get to go out there to the draft. So that's something to look forward to here. Later in the week, the draft is Thursday. Starts on Thursday. Justin will be on hand chronicling the Bijan Robinson story.
Yeah.
And hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We will try to do these as regularly as we can here moving forward. I know we're kind of exiting the prime, football and basketball season, but there's always interesting topics to talk about when it comes to U of A sports, and that's kind of what we're here for. So thank you for listening. Again, please rate, review, subscribe. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time.